Hello, good afternoon. My name is Ifeinwa Obinwa, and I want to welcome you to today's lesson. I want to welcome you to PAE 471 lecture. The title is Chemistry and Toxicology of Pesticides. I believe some other lecturers must have given you their own lecture notes on their own parts of the course, but I'm here to discuss few topics which are part of my own schedule. And number one of them is health hazards associated with pesticide use. Then the second is safety requirements in the use of pesticides. So we'll start with the first one, which is health hazards associated with pesticide use. We know that pesticides are common chemicals that we use in our houses, in the farmlands, or wherever, anywhere that we can find pests, unwanted organisms, whether they are plants or animals. And these pesticides are common chemicals that we use to eliminate all these a lot of variety of living organisms that are unwanted, that we call pests. And then particularly we use that in agriculture, because during cultivation of plants and even storage of farm produce, we have pests that do not rest because they either feed on the plant produce or plant materials, or they just want to destroy it. So these pests need to be controlled if we must get the desired result, like a great yield or a wonderful harvest, wonderful crops, healthy crops and all that. So we need to deal with these pests. And one of the ways we can deal with them is by the use of pesticides. And pesticides is a chemical formulation that we use to deal with the pests. All right, and these pesticides have different types based on the type of pests that we intend to control at every particular time. For instance, number one, we have insecticides. Insecticides is a type of pesticide that we use to control insects that can damage our crops. And then herbicides is the chemical that we use to control weeds, from the word herbs, weeds, which are unwanted plants that struggle with our crops for nutrients and water and some other materials. And then we have the fungicides. Fungicides, they are used to control the fungi, the mold, the mildew, and some other diseases that are associated with them. So, and then lastly, we have the rodenticides. We use that one to control the rodents like the rats that move around our stored materials, our stored farm produce. So these pesticides, in as much as we have a good intention for their use, maybe to control pests that attack our crops or farm produce, in as much as we have a good intent for making use of them, they, in the long run, or on the other hand, pose threats to the health of other organisms. For instance, even a particular pesticide that is intended to use on a particular plant can be dangerous to another plant. So, with the use of pesticides, they can pose a great threat and health hazard to other organisms, including man. So, how do we do that? Pesticides can have various health and environmental hazards due to high biological activity, and can also cause that because of long persistence in the environment. They cause environmental hazards. They threaten the health of other living organisms that were not initially intended for their use. Okay, so some of the hazards that are associated with these chemicals can be toxicity, which means they can be toxic, anything that is toxic is something that is highly harmful. It is harmful. It can deal with the organism in a way that it can cause a whole lot of diseases. And then some of these pesticides also can be flammable. They can also be corrosive. They can also be irritating, and they can also be explosive in different ways. But we're going to focus on the hazards that they pose to life, especially humans. Okay, and in the case of the hazards, we'll look at the toxicity, because it is the toxicity that affects human beings and other animals like our pets and others that we have around our homes. Toxicity refers to inherent poisonous ability of a material. So when we say that something is toxic, it means that it has the ability to cause harm when an organism is exposed to it, or when it meets an organism. Okay, so in the case of the risk associated with pesticides, that risk is what happens when you come in contact with the pesticide. Like if you're not using the pesticide, you don't pose any, you don't stand a chance of getting harmed by the pesticide if the pesticide is actually dangerous. Okay, it is only when you come in contact with the pesticide, like you used it, you sprayed it, or you met with the spilled container, or any other thing can happen, maybe a spill, or the container was damaged and all that, and then you came in contact with it. You're trying to be a good Samaritan by helping to pick up without protecting yourself. That is, you have now exposed yourself to the pesticide. Okay, so apart from using it for a benefit, when you go through some of these things I just mentioned, you find out that you have already exposed yourself. Okay, or maybe you're working in a factory where these pesticides are produced, and you are helping to package it, or you're helping to transport it, move it from one point to another point, or from the factory to a vehicle, or from the vehicle to the store of the owner who just bought a trailer load, a motor load, and all that. These are exposures that we call risk or the hazard. Okay, so where we have toxicity of a pesticide, and then there is an exposure to the toxicity of that pesticide, or there is an exposure to a pesticide that is toxic, then we can now say that it can cause a health hazard, or a health hazard will be experienced, or that it can harm the health of an organism, especially man and some other pests we have in the house. Hazard tells us of the toxicity of a pesticide and our ability to expose ourselves to the pesticide. Okay, so in my notes, I'm sorry the video is unable to show some maybe key points, but we'll do that in our subsequent videos if need be. It's because of some logistics that we are not met before this production. So the hazard is or equals toxicity and exposure. There must be a toxic pesticide, and somebody must be exposed to that pesticide before we can say, okay, this pesticide is now causing this harm, or is now threatening the health of this organism. Okay, now toxicity also is the capacity of the pesticide to cause either a short-term injury or illness, we call it acute illness, or a long-term injury or illness, we call it chronic illness. All right, they are all summarized into harm that the pesticide can cause. So there are illnesses as a result of acute illness or acute injury, and there are illnesses that are as a result of chronic illness or injury, as the case may be. Now, let's classify the toxicity of pesticides. Pesticides toxicity in humans can be categorized by the nature of exposure, the route through which exposure occurs, and the body system affected. Let's start with the first one, which is the nature of exposure. How was the exposure? How did it come about? Okay, so in human exposure situations, toxicity can be divided into two main types. Number one is occupational exposure. Or rather, there's a mix up, sorry. I said in human exposure situations, toxicity by pesticides can be divided into three. That is, it can be acute, it can be subchronic, and also it can be chronic. Okay? But when we talk of the type of exposure, type of exposure tells us the level of toxicity. Is it acute? Is it subchronic? Is it chronic? So the types of exposure now is one, we have occupational exposure. Occupational exposure. For the fact there is occupation there means that is a kind of exposure you get at work. Probably you are a farmer, or probably you are an exterminator of house pests. All these people that used to go around houses fumigating, using insecticides, using pesticides, the one that can even kill snakes or scare them away, the one that can take away termites, and a whole lot of dangerous insects around the house. So these people are exterminators of house pests. Now, it's an occupation. And when you find yourself in this kind of occupation, it has its own risk. Every occupation has its own risk and its own hazard. We call it occupational hazard. Okay. So while you are working with these pesticides as your job, possibly you're an exterminator or a farmer, because some farmers use their hands to apply these pesticides in their farmlands. Maybe they don't have the money to get the services of the so-called professional in quotes, and then some of them can also be trained, or maybe they don't have or maybe somehow they have the skill, they were trained, so they can do that. All right. So while using the pesticides, the farmer or the exterminator or the individual is exposed to pesticides. While applying it, maybe you're trying to mix it, you're trying to put it in your can to spray, and it can spill on your body. You can inhale it, you can, you can touch your mouth and all that. In one way or other, it can spill on your skin. So you are being exposed because of your job, because of your occupation. So that is why we say occupational exposure. And then the second type of exposure or second nature of exposure is accidental exposure. Accidental exposure, it means by accident. It can happen by accident. Okay, so it occurs as a result of spills while handling pesticides or breakages of containers used to store them. You can use a container. A container can be used to, store a pesticide. Maybe when you want to get it from the shelf, or maybe you're just cleaning. Maybe you don't really want to spray it. Maybe you're just cleaning. You want to clean the cubicle or the shelf or whatever, and then it falls. It falls off the shelf by mistake, and maybe the container might just burst open. The content might pour on your skin, your legs, even your hands, even your face, as the case may be. It is accidental because it was not intended. Okay, so while handling pesticides we should be careful because these accidents can occur. There could be breakage, maybe there could be a case of the lid not well closed. Maybe it could be that it is not sealed properly. Or maybe somebody must have tampered with the seal or even with the cover. And you came into it not being too careful. There could be an accident. There could be a spill. There could be an outburst of the content of that container. So it's accidental. And then on the other hand also we have in a case whereby individuals can be exposed to pesticide residues, maybe in food and drinking water on a daily basis, or to pesticide drift in residential areas close to spraying areas. For instance, a farmland that heavily gets these pesticides, which maybe can be located close to a river or a stream that people go to fetch water. You find that maybe when there is a rainfall, there could be a washing away of some of these pesticides innocently into the water bodies. And when it happens, we call it drift. Drift. Okay, when it happens, it's an accident anyway. There are residues. It means that residues from the actual pesticide that was sprayed in the farmland has been washed into the water bodies. They were not actually intended for the water bodies, okay, but now they have found a way into the water bodies. And you come around to wash your food material. Some people come to the stream to wash their cassava. Some people go there to wash their breadfruits and some other food materials, as the case may be. So while washing, there could be deposits of this pesticide residue that you are just soaking up in your food materials without knowing. And then after the washing, after the whatever you're doing there, you take it home, you take it to your pot, and next you take it into your system, you ingest it. Those residues can be accumulating in your system little by little, until they get to maybe a time where they can start causing harm in the system or in the body. Okay. Occupational exposure can be described as acute, subchronic, and chronic. So when a farmer, for instance, is exposed to a single dose of a pesticide, the incidence is referred to as acute exposure. A short exposure, very short, a single dose for that matter. Acute exposure, and it leads to what we call acute toxicity. Acute toxicity refers to how poisonous a pesticide is to an organism after a single short-term exposure. So in acute toxicity, it means that the effect is felt just shortly after the exposure. Unlike in the chronic, it means it's a long-term thing. You don't really get the effect after even numerous exposures. So it depends on the lethal dose of these pesticides. If their lethal dose is high, then it can cause acute toxicity, such that once there's an exposure, the organism begins to feel the effects. And we're going to talk about the effects shortly. So if the exposure is through contact with skin, it would be regarded as an acute dermal exposure. Dermal for the skin. And the toxicity is called acute dermal toxicity. So similarly, acute oral exposure refers to a single dose of a pesticide taken by mouth. And also, acute inhalation exposure refers to a single dose inhaled. All right. Then the acute toxicity is used to describe toxic effects, which typically appear immediately or within a day, that is, within 24 hours of exposure. So an active ingredient with a high acute toxicity can be lethal, even when a very small amount is absorbed, no matter how small the amount of that chemical compound is. Okay, it is lethal. Now, the acute toxicity of a pesticide is used for the warning statements on the product label. Okay, that is to say that labels of these products, if you see the containers, you see the labels, they will tell you highly toxic, or they will tell you moderately toxic, they will tell you slightly toxic, or relatively non-toxic. It's for you to be cautious. Some people will say, for the highly toxic, some people will say poison. Moderately toxic, people will write warning. They will write warning. They will draw this warning sign. Then for the slightly toxic, they will just write caution, so that you apply caution. You should be very careful, all right, because it's not too toxic. The toxicity level is a bit low, so you have to apply caution. Be cautious, all right. And then the relatively non-toxic, you also have to apply caution while handling it, all right. So acute toxicity also refers to pesticide poisoning or illnesses. Okay, and they can occur, we've said that before, as a result of short-term exposure or contact with pesticides. Okay, the typical symptoms or illnesses in humans as a result of acute toxicity can include the following: fatigue, headache. Some people have this very bad headache, and body aches, okay, skin discomfort, rashes, skin rashes here and there, and they will be itching, then poor concentration, feelings of weakness, circulatory problems, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, excessive sweating, impaired vision, tremors, panic attacks, and even cramps. And in severe cases, it can lead to coma and death. So, diagnosis of this acute pesticide poisoning occurs when one or more of these symptoms appear a short time after contact with pesticide. So you can diagnose this acute pesticide poisoning if any of these symptoms mentioned above appear shortly after an exposure, in less than 24 hours. Okay, and then we can take some samples, maybe from the blood, urine, or the stomach, okay, to test the contents to know if these pesticides, in whatever concentration, can be found in those samples. Okay, so the severity of symptoms is frequently classified on a scale ranging from mild to moderate or severe to lethal. Right? Now, the subchronic toxicity is the ability of a chemical compound to cause toxic health effects for over a year. At least there's a time frame for, few months to a year, just over a year. And so when the symptoms start manifesting, you remember that day that you handled the pesticides, or remember what happened. Maybe there was an accident, or that day you sprayed so much in your farmland. Maybe you are an exterminator, as the case may be. So, in such a case, we call it subchronic toxicity. So, in cases of continuous exposure to a pesticide occurring repeatedly by an individual, the incident is referred to as chronic exposure. Okay, and this subchronic exposure can be either subchronic oral, that is, if the pesticide was taken into the body through the mouth, okay, or subchronic inhalation if the pesticide was inhaled. So it depends on the route it gets into the body. So the last is chronic toxicity, and is the ability of a pesticide to cause adverse effects over an extended period of time. That is, maybe the lethal dose is little and it has been accumulating, and then one day it feels like, yeah, I've gathered enough. It's time to act. It's time to review myself. So this chronic toxicity is the ability of a pesticide to cause adverse effects, health effects, over an extended period of time, usually after repeated or continuous exposure. you keep exposing yourself. Maybe as a farmer, you're using the pesticide, you're handling the pesticide, and maybe you did it for maybe you did that every month for probably a year. The first year you used it, you sprayed in your farm, nothing happened to you. The second year, nothing happened to you. The third year, nothing happened. Fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10. Maybe on the 10th year, the accumulation of all those exposures, because somehow you must have spit on your hand, you must have felt the dust, you must have inhaled, as the case may be. So usually, that continuous exposure can lead to chronic toxicity. Okay, and this chronic toxicity can last for a lifetime. All right. So the exposures can also either be chronic oral or chronic inhalation, as the case may be. So chronic toxicity, which causes chronic illnesses, can occur if pesticides are incorporated over a longer period, even if the amounts taken up are relatively small. All right, symptoms can often diffuse or do not become apparent for a long time, which then leads to late effects. Farm workers are especially at risk, but the general population is also affected. For example, due to contaminated food or consumer goods or pesticide drift from fields, many pesticides that are commonly used today have been classified on the basis of animal testing as possibly or probably carcinogenic for humans. So even if the general public don't use this pesticide, or even if a greater number of people don't use this pesticide, but we stand a chance of being exposed due to contaminated food, contaminated farm produce, and contaminated anything, be water, as the case may be, as a result of pesticide drift from fields into water bodies. We can use those water to wash clothes. Sometimes we go there to fetch water to drink without knowing the content, of that water. So at this point that there is pesticide drift into the water bodies, they are now poisonous. All right. Results of various epidemiological studies are inconsistent, and therefore they will leave no doubt that agricultural workers exposed to pesticides have a significant risk of contracting leukemia. Other studies have also revealed a correlation between pesticide use and sarcomas, multiple myelomas, cancer of the prostate, pancreas, lungs, ovaries, the breast, testicles, liver, kidneys, and intestine, and even as well as brain tumors. That is why sometimes when people get sick from all these things, maybe later in life, they begin to wonder how come? But if they trace back to maybe their lifestyle, occupation, their exposures, they will know that at a point in their life, they were exposed to these dangerous chemicals that we use as pesticide. So too much accumulation can, at another time in life, bring forth a heavy disease that can even lead to death. All right. So furthermore, pesticides can damage the human nervous system. There are indications that there is a connection between pesticide exposure and reduced sensitive faculties, disruptions in cognitive and psychomotoric functions, and also depression. So it can affect our CNS, central nervous system. Okay, pesticides, inhaling it, just getting in contact with it can lead to depression. It has the ability to lead to depression. So even in some studies also, they've found out that pesticides exposure can lead to Parkinson's disease. Okay, Parkinson's disease. So even at that, in the life of the farmers or anybody who is exposed to pesticide use, sometimes they are not just the ones that suffer the effects. Even their children, unborn children, can be transferred. So when somebody suffers a degenerative illness of the nervous system, okay, it can lead to disruption of the children's neurological development because you give birth to those children with that health disorder, okay, and those kind of children will have learning deficiency, okay, attention deficits, sensory deficits, or retarded development can affect their growth as well. So it has also been shown that this pesticide exposure or chronic pesticide exposure can disrupt the hormones or the hormonal system. It can disrupt it. And fetuses that are exposed to these substances may also suffer developmental disorders and malformations of some organs, including their sexual organs. Okay, so other late effects due to pesticides use or long-term ingestion or small amounts of these substances include weakening of the immune system and effects on the reproductive system, which can lead to miscarriage. It can also lead to stillbirth. It can also lead to premature birth or low birth weight, as the case may be. Now, the routes through which exposure can occur. Remember, we said the different ways to classify or categorize the toxicity of pesticides is 1, the nature of exposure. Is it acute? Is it subchronic? Is it chronic? And 2, the route through which the exposure occurs. Pesticide exposure occurs when pesticides get into or onto the body. Onto means probably on the outside, maybe on the skin. Then into means inside the body system. So there are 4 primary routes of exposure. They are the skin, we call it dermal, the eyes, we call it ocular, the lungs, inhalation, and then the mouth, we call it oral. So the skin or dermal routes, usually we know that the skin is, in fact, it covers the whole body. So anything that affects the skin is affecting every part of our body. So up to 97% of all body exposure to pesticide during a spraying operation is by skin contact. And spraying is also very dangerous, okay, unless you are highly protected. So dermal absorption or contact injury may occur from airborne dust, splashes, spills, or spray mists, maybe when mixing the insecticide, when loading the insecticide, when applying the insecticide, or disposing of the pesticides, as the case may be. So skin exposure may also result from contact with pesticide residues, untreated surfaces, or contaminated equipment during cleaning, adjustment, or even repair. All right. So once a pesticide come in contact with the body, there is absorption on the skin. The skin begins to absorb those dangerous materials, no matter how little. And then after absorption, there is penetration deep into the system and the distribution from the skin to the other parts of the body where it can get to. All right. And this movement or this contact depends on the chemical properties of the pesticide product. It also depends on the area of contact and the rates of absorption and the body own detoxification and elimination capabilities. If the body has huge ability to detoxify itself or eliminate pesticide or unwanted materials in the body, then that person is lucky. A great quantity of the pesticide can be moved out of the body. But in cases where it's not the case, those pesticides that come in contact with the skin will be absorbed and distributed as well. So parts of the body differ in their ability to absorb pesticides. Warm, moist areas such as groin, armpits, head, neck, back of hands, and top of the feet tend to absorb more than the palms and forearms. However, the palms and forearms must still be protected because they get the most exposure. Because whatever happens, whether it was a spill, whether it was a mistake, or because you are doing your job and all that, it is the skin, the hand or the palms that you also use to clear them out of your body. Okay, if you're handling it alone, whether you're using a piece of rag or using a piece of towel or whatever thing you're using, or you are even using water to wash, it must be in contact with your towel or your hand. So pesticide formulations penetrate the skin at different rates. In general, wettable materials. So sorry for that. In general, wettable powders, dust, and granular pesticides do not enter easily. They do not enter easily. However, oil-based liquid formulations such as emulsifiable concentrates are readily absorbed. Application techniques may also affect exposure levels of applicators. Making overhead applications, using blower application equipment for mist and dots are application methods that often have high dermal exposure levels. So we say that using blower application equipment for mist and dust have high dermal exposure levels. Okay, then additionally, contaminated hands or gloves can transfer pesticides to other body parts. Be sure to wash your hand, people, and gloves after each pesticide handling activity. And then for the eyes or the ocular roof, eye damage from chemical exposure. Pesticides can be absorbed. Sorry about that too. Eye damage from chemical exposure like pesticides can be absorbed quickly and easily into the blood vessels that lie very close to the surface of the eye. In addition, corrosive products can cause severe eye damage or even blindness. Pesticides can get into your eyes as airborne dust or particles, splashes or spills, broken hoses, spray mitts, or from rubbing the eyes with contaminated hands or clothing. Okay, and number 3 is breathing or inhalation routes. You have to protect your lungs when mixing, loading, or applying pesticides. Protect your lungs, protect your nose. All right. Applying pesticide, particularly in confined areas. Insufficient amounts inhaled pesticides can cause contact damage to sensitive tissues. They can either So breathing or inhalation routes, you are advised to protect your lungs when mixing, loading, or applying pesticides, particularly in confined areas. In sufficient amounts, inhaled pesticide can cause contact damage to sensitive tissues. They can enter the bloodstream very rapidly from the lungs, eventually damaging other body's organs as a systematic illness. Okay. So also petroleum solvents in emulsifiable concentrate formulations can enter the lungs while vomiting. So number 4 is swallowing or oral route. Oral routes or oral exposure can occur when liquid concentrate splash into the mouth during mixing or loading. Alright, swallowing or oral route. Oral exposure can occur when liquid concentrate splash into the mouth during mixing and loading of pesticide or while cleaning equipment. Never use your mouth to clear a spray. Never use your mouth to clear a spray line or to begin siphoning a pesticide. No. Even to use the mouth to maybe open containers containing pesticides is a no. So, eating, drinking, or smoking without first washing your hands may transfer products to your mouth. People are most likely to people are most likely to accidentally swallow pesticides that are improperly stored in the home or transferred into unlabeled bottles. Sometimes, maybe when the original bottle gets old, you have this need to transfer the contents into maybe empty cans or whatever. And if you mistakenly put that in an old baby milk can, you are inviting trouble because your children can look at it and feel okay. So clearly mark all cups and containers used to measure pesticide and store them separately from devices used to measure food and beverages. Don't transfer pesticides into other containers, or if you must do, you label. If you must do, you label. Let's take for instance that the original container was damaged, maybe as a result of packing or as a result of some other things. When you change the containers, you label. If it is a milk container, don't leave it like that. Or a beverage container. Your children might think, or children around might think, this is actually beverage. And when you're not around, they might be tempted to, go and get a bit of it. Alright. So, the body system affected. Pesticides can harm humans in 2 ways: by causing poison or by causing injury. Pesticides are poisonous. They are poisonous. Okay, so the body system affected, pesticide may harm humans via poison and injuries, and poisoning is caused by pesticides that affect organs or systems inside the body. So when it is ingested, we call it poison. All right, and when it is maybe outside the body, like on the skin, we say that, or rather we put it that it has caused some injury, because you see a whole lot of reaction. Maybe the skin will be peeling off and all that. But for people who don't have a church, who don't have okay, so toxic effects of pesticides can range from mild symptoms like minor skin irritation or other allergic symptoms to more severe symptoms like upper stroke. Okay, I said some pesticides are highly toxic to humans, and only small amounts can cause highly harmful effects. So, other active ingredients can be less toxic, but overexposure to them can also be detrimental because accumulation of these chemicals over a long period of time in the body can cause harm at a later age or a later time. Then the toxic effects by pesticide exposure can range from mild symptoms like minor skin irritation or other allergic symptoms to more symptoms like strong headache, dizziness, or nausea. Some parasites, example, or some pesticides rather, example the organophosphates. Okay, some pesticides, example the organophosphates, can cause severe symptoms like convulsions, coma, and even death. Coma and possibly even death. So, health effects of pesticides. There are local or contact effects and there are systematic effects. So, local effects occur to the areas of contact with the skin, eyes, or respiratory tract. Local effects. Because all of us have, not all of us have numerous land where we do market or space. Okay, and we don't cultivate beans and rice, but at least okay. So the local effects may occur to the area of contact with the skin, eyes, or respiratory tracts. It can lead to symptoms like skin irritation or injury, itching, redness, rashes, blisters, burns, and even discoloration. It can make your skin to have multiple colors. And many herbicides and fungicides cause dermatitis. Alright, fumigants can cause severe blisters. Then eye irritation or injury. It could cause swelling, stinging, and burning. Alright. So now the systematic effects. Systematic effects occur once the substance is absorbed and distributed throughout the body. That is trying to explain the chronic illness. Alright. So it may be also acute or chronic. The effects depend on the toxicological profile of the chemical itself, the amount absorbed, and the individual's ability to detoxify and eliminate the chemical. Okay, examples of systematic effects are damage to nerves, reduced ability of blood to clot, and inadequate ability of the blood to clot, and then some cancers. Okay, and then some cancers, reproductive problems, impaired metabolism, that's the body's ability to use energy. Then there will be hormonal effects which cause damage to various organ systems. So in the literature, I gave examples of some certain classes of pesticides like the organophosphates and also the carbamates. They attack the brain and the nervous system. So I gave some examples of their effects on the body system. And then we have other kind of pesticides we call like the soil fumigants. So they are pesticides applied to soil, forming a gas that is toxic to nematodes, fungi, bacteria, insects, and plants in the soil. And you can imagine that. So when you use this kind of pesticide in a farmland to kill or to destroy a particular pest, and then some other plants that are quite exposed to this pesticide can be dealt with in numerous ways, just as we disclose here. All right. Okay. So the next one is the precioids. So they are pesticides or insecticides all right. Sorry for that. Okay. So the precioids they are synthetic chemicals that are structurally similar to botanical compounds but have been designed to be more persistent. They are toxic, especially to the nervous system, and they are not friendly to the fetus at all. So during pregnancy, the fetus might not be able to efficiently break down the chemicals. Alright, so symptoms of precioid poisoning include tremors, salivation, headache, fatigue, vomiting, stinging, and itching skin, and tremors, okay, and involuntary twitching. Now, many precioids cause long-term health problems. For example, the resmetirom, which causes both cancer and reproductive harm. Okay, and if they are not banned from the market or if they are not destroyed, it will cause a whole lot of health issues, a whole lot of them, and a handful of quality medical personnel. The effect of insecticides can range from damage of the transmission of nerve pulses to the Alright, safety is very important so that we prevent ourselves from being exposed. Of course, there are times it is inevitable to use these pesticides, but while handling the pesticide, there are safety requirements we must adhere to so that we don't get harmed. We don't get harmed by these chemicals. Actually, they are chemicals. Okay, and I think studies are there to work on or improve the state of these pests and pesticides. They need to be improved. We don't need to be using chemicals that cause problems for us every time. So we can find other means that are environmental friendly, that are eco-friendly, that will help us to deal with this pest and we'll have our peace. Now, there are some safety requirements in the use of pesticides. Number one, I divided them into stages. So I'm going to take them one after the other. Number one, before using a pesticide, there are some things we must do. You should read the label thoroughly. You should be familiar with the precautions. Read them. You should also be familiar with the first aid information. And then you should go on to put on the proper personal protective equipment, which we call the PPE. So first of all, if you go through the label and the precautions, you read them, you understand them, and then comply with them. Okay? This label will normally it provides the essential information on the product. It tells you the kind of chemical this is, and then it includes the trade name, the active ingredients, and it will also tell you the purpose for which it is intended. Okay, and also it will tell you the safety precautions and directions on how you're going to use them, what you need to do to keep safe, and the warning statements and the first aid instructions. They will tell you, in case this happens, this is what you're going to do. Don't do this. Don't use water. Don't use your cloth. Don't rub with your skin and all that. So it is essential to read this information and follow the instructions carefully to prevent accidents and minimize exposure to the chemical. And then the safety precautions we have to imbibe during the pesticide use. While using the pesticide, we must first of all put on our PPE, personal protective equipment. Okay, wear it throughout the body, cover your face, your nose, your eyes, everywhere, your head, your toes. Make sure they are all covered. Okay, and if you had studied the label and the information on the container or the any information written anywhere about the pesticide, they will suggest to you the kind of PPE to use, because they will tell you something like keep products out of the eyes. Okay, avoid skin contact. When they tell you avoid skin contact, you should know that you need to cover your skin very well. And if they say keep products out of the eyes, out of the reach of the eyes, you should know that in anyhow you are applying it, you must make sure that it doesn't get to your eyes, because it could be dangerous. And it will suggest to you the kind of PPE to use. Is it long sleeve, usually long sleeve, long pants, overalls, non-absorbent gloves, and other fabrics, rubber footwear? Okay, do you need a hat? Do you need goggle? And all that and all that. So it will tell you, or it will suggest to you the kind of PPE to use and be safe. So when mixing or applying a pesticide, number one, do not smoke. Do not smoke while you are applying pesticide or while mixing. Okay, because you could be putting the hand you use to maybe touch the pesticide to your mouth while holding a cigarette or whatever. Excuse me. Then you should follow the directions for use on the label carefully. Know how they said mix. If they said put this proportion onto this, or if they said put this one before you put this one, know how to use it and do it carefully. Then again, you should use the pesticide only for the purpose for which it was intended, for which it was listed. Don't say, since it can kill this pest, it should also be able to kill this one. For the purpose for which, only for the purpose for which it was written, it was intended, you should use. Okay. Also, use only the amount directed. Don't you think that when you put too much, it will do twice the job? Twice the amount will not do twice the job. Okay, only the amount. If they say use 5 grams, please use 5. Don't use 10. You could be harming yourself, and you could even be harming the plants or the produce or the farm materials that you intended to protect in the first place. Okay, then you could harm yourself in the process, or harm your plant or area, or even your pets that you are trying to protect in the first place. Like if you are using maybe all these maybe mixtures that they say can kill some ants. Let me say like termites, insecticide. Okay, so too much quantity, more than was specified by the manufacturers of that insecticide, it can inhaling it. Your pet inhaling it can cause harm. Even your baby inhaling it, your children, the little children who are still struggling with building up their immune system, when they inhale such materials, it could be dangerous to them. Okay, so while mixing, only mix the quantity that you will use. Use the amount that you can use at that particular point in time. Don't add extra so that you will keep. Don't mix the one you will keep. Use the quantity you know you need at that point in time. And always mix or dilute the pesticide outdoors, not inside the house, not inside the kitchen. It could drop on surfaces, and somebody who never saw you mix it there can, pick it up by keeping their hands on the surface, or by picking up edible stuff that fell on such surface and picking it up to put back in their mouth. Okay, it could harm them. So keep children, keep pets, including birds, fishes, everything, including toys, children toys. Keep them away from the areas you mix these pesticides, or even areas you apply this pesticide. So you should look carefully and make sure that such things that you use at home do not get any bits of that insecticide or pesticide. So if clothing becomes saturated in spray solution or contaminated with the pesticide concentrate, dispose that cloth immediately. Wash any parts of the body that may have been exposed to the pesticide with soap and water, and finish the job in fresh, clean clothing. Don't say, let me manage it. If you have been exposed to pesticide, maybe it's peeled and then poured on your clothes, don't manage it, because it might be soaking up and attacking your skin. Go change it, get a clean one, and finish your job, right? Never put baits for insects or rats, mice, and other rodents where small children or pets can reach it. And pesticides are formulated as baits containing a feed attractant that is able to attract these rodents or some other pests. Okay, so don't keep them where children can reach them, or even pets. All right, consider selective insecticide, okay, to avoid harm to non-target organisms. So whatever insecticide you're picking, make sure it is direct for that particular purpose you want to use it for. Don't say, okay, let me just spray all of them. It will do this or do that. No, be specific so that you so that you use it on the targeted organisms and avoid harming the non-target organisms. So how do we maintain safety while storing these pesticides? Never put pesticides into food containers. I think I've said that earlier, such as empty soft drink or milk bottles or tea bottles or beverage bottles. Keep pesticides in their original containers once that clearly identify the contents. Then refasten all childproof caps tightly. But if you must maybe put it in another container, maybe the container got damaged or got burst or whatever, then after putting it in a new container, you remove the old label that says milk, that says pig milk, or that says Ovaltine. Remove it, scrape it off, and then relabel it. Give it the name of the pesticide or insecticide or whatever that you have now put inside. Don't leave the old name so that children will not be deceived. Right? So if a spill occurs during storage, clean it up promptly. Don't wash it away. Instead, sprinkle the spill with sawdust or kitty litter. Sweep it into a plastic garbage bag and dispose it as directed on the pesticide label. Clean up materials that are contaminated with the pesticide. Okay, clean up materials that are contaminated with a pesticide must be handled as pesticide waste. Even that towel that you use to clean the surface, you consider it a waste. Okay, because even going ahead to wash it, you're endangering yourself, you're causing a big hazard to yourself. Now, indoor applications. If you are to use this insecticide indoor or pesticide, make sure that the pesticide label indicates that the product can be used indoors. Otherwise, please do not use indoor. Okay? Then provide adequate ventilation. If the label direction permits, leave all windows open and fans operating after the application is completed. Okay? Apply most surface sprays only to limited areas such as cracks. Don't treat entire floors, walls, or ceiling unless the label permits you to do so. So when using total release foggers to control pests, foggers are those materials we use to release the chemical, the pesticide. So when using the foggers, you need to take the following into consideration. Use no more than the amount of pesticide needed, and then keep foggers away from ignition surfaces, ovens, stoves, air conditioners, space heaters, water heaters. Okay, don't place foggers in small enclosed places such as closets and cabinets or under tables or counters. Keep them out of reach of children. Alright, so in the kitchen, if you need insecticide in your kitchen or pesticide, you remove food, pots, and pans and dishes before treating kitchen cabinets. Don't let pesticide get on any surface that are used for food preparation. Wait until shelves dry before refilling them. So when you do anything, maybe after cleaning, you wait till the shelves are dry before you refill. Then wash any surface that may have pesticide residues before placing food on them. Cover aquariums with plastic during pesticide applications. So during outdoor applications too, you should be aware of drifting. Drift is the movement of pesticide away from the target area or plants. You should always follow all available directions for both the pesticide and application equipment to prevent drift. Then also never apply pesticide outdoors on a windy day. On a windy day, do not apply pesticide outdoors or when winds are gusty or variable in direction. Please wait. When you have a calm atmosphere and when the wind has a particular direction, you don't know how to apply your pesticide. Not when the wind is blowing here and there. It can move this pesticide to areas you never intended for them to get to. Right? So use coax droplet nozzles on your sprayer to reduce missing. Larger droplets help prevent drift. Okay, spray as close to the target as possible. You want to get good coverage while still preventing drift. So spray as close to the target as possible so you can get a good coverage. All right. Do not apply pesticides on very hot days with temperatures above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The active ingredients in some pesticide can vaporize and drift onto non-target surfaces. All right. So do not over apply pesticide. Excessive application can cause the pesticide to run off or seep into water supplies and contaminate them. So once contaminated, it is difficult or impossible to clean water sources. Alright? Then excess spray may leave harmful residues on your homegrown fruit and vegetable, and this could affect other plants, wildlife, and fish. Also, read the label to determine if the pesticide should be watered in by irrigation. Never mix or apply a pesticide near wellheads, stormwater drains, or bodies of water such as creeks and streams. Keep your pesticide away from plants, away from plants and wildlife you do not want to treat. Okay, cover outdoor ornamental fish ponds. When applying pesticide to food crops and gardens, always check to make sure they are labeled and follow the re-entry time. Alright, some pesticides are toxic to pollinators, so read the label carefully to determine if their application timing or other restrictions. Okay, do not spray bird nets while treating trees. Bird nests. Alright, pollinators are organisms that cause pollination in plants. So the pesticide could be toxic to these pollinators, and if they are toxic to them, the label can tell you, okay, don't do that during the daytime. Maybe when these pollinators are active, do it at night, or don't do it at social time, don't do it when the sun is out, or blah blah blah. So you follow the instructions carefully. Then after applying a pesticide, indoors or outdoors, what do? Proper cleaning procedures should always be followed after applying pesticides. To remove pesticide residues, use a bucket to thoroughly rinse tools or equipment that you used when mixing the pesticides. Pour the rinsed water into the pesticide sprayer and dispose of it by applying to a labeled site. Wash non-absorbent gloves and rubber boots thoroughly with hot soapy water. To prevent exposure to the hands, wash your gloves prior to removing them. To prevent tracking pesticides inside, remove or rinse your boots or shoes before entering your home. Wash any part of your body that may have come in contact with the pesticide. And then while carrying out laundry, you should not mix contaminated clothing worn during pesticide application with other family laundry in the hamper or the wash. Wash all protective equipment as soon as possible following each use. If someone else washes the protective equipment, make certain this person is aware of safe handling and cleaning procedures. Now, dispose of clothing saturated with diluted pesticides or heavily contaminated with a concentrated chemical. Place the clothing in a plastic bag and in the garbage outdoors. Evaluate the results of a pesticide use. If the pesticide did not control the pest, consider using a different chemical, or you consider using a non-chemical method, or you consider a combination of non-chemical and chemical methods. Okay? Again, using more pesticides than the label recommends will not do a better job. So, applying more pesticide than instructed by the label is illegal. So, these are the precautions that we've been able to discuss, the safety requirements for us to stay safe while applying these pesticides. So at this juncture, I think I have to end it, and I'll be glad to entertain any question or any confusion anywhere of any kind. Please feel free to get your questions across to me. Get your observations, or maybe you want to add something to what I've said, or maybe something is not clear to you. Please just raise it up and we'll talk about that. Okay? Thanks for watching. I believe I've taken note of the shortcomings in this video. I believe the next videos or the subsequent videos will be greatly improved. So with your comments, with your feedback, we'll be able to adjust and get it better next time. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much for, you listen, you watch. Thank you very much for watching. And God bless you. Bye.